Welcome back. All right, career video time. Let's talk about Mark Howe. Mark Howe, a player that I double checked to make sure I hadn't already done a career video on because I was a big Mark Howe fan back in the 80s. And Mark Howe, of course, the son of famous Gordie Howe, Mr. Hockey himself. And Mark Howe had himself quite the career, was in the NHL for quite some time. His pro career between the WHA and the NHL over 20 years. Now, at the time that he joins the Houston Aeros, in 1973, he's 18 years of age. Now, in the NHL, we don't think twice. 18-year-olds, sure, they can play in the NHL. But joining the WHA at age 18, that's younger than the draft age for the National Hockey League. So the following year, the Boston Bruins draft him 25th overall. So you have players in the NHL drafted by WHA teams and vice versa. Kind of makes it a bit of a mess, doesn't it? So he played both defense and the wing. And this is where things get a little bit confusing when you get into WHA and you get into the All-Star teams at the end of the year. 73-74, that first year with the Houston Aeros, 76 games, 38 goals, which was 10th overall in the WHA that year, 41 assists for 79 points. In the playoffs, 14 games, 9 goals, 10 assists, 19 points. Houston wins the Avco Cup. They're champions that year. He also won the Kaplan Award. That was the Rookie of the Year award in the WHA. And he's a second-team All-Star on the left wing, even though he does play defense as well. 74-75, still playing for Houston. 74 games, 36 goals, 40 assists, 76 points. 13 games in the playoffs, 10 goals, 12 assists, 22 points, and a second straight Avco Cup. So for Houston, things are going really well. You've got all the Howes playing there, and excitement's pretty high. And the WHA, it looks like on the surface, is doing pretty well, and they're paying big money to players to come over to play, which is making NHL owners angry. And Clarence Campbell, famous for being quite angry with the league. But anyway, 75-76, Houston. Again, for Mark Howe, 72 games, 39 goals, 37 assists, 76 points in 17 playoff games, 6 goals, 10 assists, 16 points. He was a big game player, absolutely. 76-77, still playing for Houston, 57 games, 23 goals, 52 assists, 75 points. 11 games in the playoffs, 4 goals, 10 assists, 14 points. He was on the second All-Star team that year on the defense. So he's a left winger on the second team in 1974. 1977, he's on defense. Now, 77-78, he goes to New England, play for the Whalers. Signed as a free agent June of 1977. And why not? Dad's there, brother's there, going to play there. 70 games with New England the following season, 30 goals, 61 assists, which is 8th overall in the WHA. 91 points, which is 10th overall. In the playoffs, 14 games, 8 goals, 7 assists, 15 points. So nice run in the playoffs for the New England Whalers. And if you haven't seen the New England Whalers jersey, by all means, check it out. They're really nice. So the final year for the WHA is 78-79. And Mark Howe has quite the year. 77 games, 42 goals, which is 6th overall in the WHA. 65 assists, which is 4th overall. 107 points, which is 4th overall. Which, again, according to what I was reading, he's strictly a defenseman at this point once he's a Whaler. So that's insane, right? I understand it's WHA, which does inflate the totals, but still, very strong numbers. In the playoffs, 6 games, 4 goals, 2 assists, 6 points. He's a first-team All-Star, and it's listed as a left winger that he was named the first-team All-Star for. So my guess is he liked to play defense, but played wing enough that he ends up being an All-Star on the wing. Sometimes guys get voted just to positions they may not be playing that much. I remember Ovechkin being voted on the right wing and the left wing at the end of the year for the All-Star teams. So the WHA folds, right? 78-79 is the final year, and a few of the teams are allowed into the NHL. But when they're joining the NHL teams are exercising the fact they've drafted these players. So the Boston Bruins want Mark Howe. They're like, okay, we drafted him in 1974, he's ours. And this is one mistake the NHL makes, is that as the WHA teams are coming in, NHL teams are like, we drafted him, he's our property, we can have him back. They shouldn't have. Honestly, the WHA teams should have been allowed to come in as they were. Now, you could use a priority selection to overrule a team trying to grab a player, but obviously they couldn't do it with all of them. But the Hartford Whalers exercise a priority selection to make sure they keep Mark Howe when they join the NHL. And 79-80, he's great. 74 games, 24 goals, 56 assists, 80 points. Again, all on the blue line. In the playoffs, 3 games, 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points. He's 5th in Norris voting that year. So the sky's the limit. 80-81, a year that kind of transforms things for him. So 63 games played that year, 19 goals, 46 assists, 65 points. He plays in the All-Star game. He's 10th in Norris voting, but he's almost paralyzed. He collides with the net. Now, this is before we had magnets, before we had the posts kind of sort of attached, but not really like we have now, where if a player crashes into the net, it moves, right? And injuries like Mark Howe's, where the net kind of comes up and then stabs him in the backside, and he loses a ton of blood, and the impact almost causes him to be paralyzed for the rest of his life. Scary stuff. Scary stuff, and part of the reason why the NHL eventually makes it so that the net comes off. Which the debate is out there as to whether or not it's a good thing. I've seen people say, they should go back to where the net's attached. Yeah, well, I'd rather not see guys get paralyzed for crashing the net. So, Howe does have a good season coming back off that injury, but it does kind of hurt his rushing ability. And so he's never quite exactly the same defenseman, but he's still very good. So 81-82, still playing for the Whalers, 76 games, 8 goals, 45 assists, 53 points. So the goal scoring has dropped off quite a bit, but the points production is still there. August 18th, surprisingly, the Whalers trade him. I say surprisingly because, he'd be a draw, right? But it's a pretty big deal they make with Philadelphia. He's traded with a 1983 third, which was used to draft Derek Smith. And going the other way, a 1983 first, which was used to draft David Jensen. A third, where they used that to draft Leif Carlson. By my guess, neither player played in the NHL. Greg C. Adams was going the other way as well. And Ken Lindsman. So Ken Lindsman, the big part of that trade, right, going to the Whalers, whereas Howe goes to the Flyers. I'm going to go out on a limb and say the Flyers win this trade. His first year with Philadelphia, the goal scoring comes back. 76 games, 20 goals, 47 assists, 67 points. You would have no idea he had that horrible injury running into the net in 1980. So in the playoffs, 3 games, just the 2 assists, but he ends up a first-team All-Star, 2nd in Norris voting, 5th in Hart voting, 7th in Lady Byng voting, and he plays in the All-Star game. So well-respected player there. 83-84, plays 71 games for Philly, 19 goals, 34 assists, 53 points. Has 3 playoff games, no points there. He's 10th in Norris voting that year. 84-85, 73 games with Philadelphia, 18 goals, 39 assists for 57 points. In the playoffs, Philadelphia goes all the way to the final. 19 games for Howe, 3 goals, 8 assists, 11 points. He is 6th in Norris voting. So one of the best defensemen in the league. And, really, really remarkable totals. And 85-86, the totals get better. 77 games, 24 goals, 58 assists, 82 points. He adds 4 assists in 5 playoff games. First team All-Star, yep. 2nd in Norris voting, absolutely. He's 3rd in voting for the Hart and 4th in Lady Byng voting, and he goes to the All-Star game. So he was almost a finalist for 3 different awards that year. Everything's coming up Howe at that point, right? 86-87, he plays 69 games that year, 15 goals, 43 assists, 58 points. And the Flyers go to the final again. 26 games, 2 goals, 10 assists, 12 points. So Mark Howe, a real linchpin for them on the blue line, and they get to the Stanley Cup final for the 2nd time in 3 years. That year, he's a first-team All-Star, 2nd in Norris voting, 7th in Hart voting, and 5th in the Lady Byng voting. So again, a lot of different votes going towards Mark Howe at this stage in his career. 87-88, 75 games, 19 goals, 43 assists, 62 points. He adds 3 goals and 6 assists for 9 points in 7 playoff games. He's 9th in Norris voting, 8th in Lady Byng, and plays in his final All-Star game that year. 88-89, he only plays 52 games. So now we're getting into some chronic injuries, and his back was going to be a problem that caused him to miss time, and the majority of the 90-91 season, which we'll get to. But 88-89, 52 games, 9 goals, 29 assists, 38 points. In the playoffs, 19 games, 15 assists. So no goals, but 15 assists. That's a really strong total for Mark Howe. 89-90, 40 games played, 7 goals, 21 assists, 28 points. 90-91, as I mentioned, the back problems caused him to miss a majority of this year. 19 games, just the 10 assists. So no goals in that season. 91-92, as games played, jumped back up to 42. 7 goals, 18 assists, 25 points for him there. And then that's where his contract runs out with Philadelphia. He knows his time in the NHL is coming to an end. why not go and play where your father became an absolute legend, right? So he signs with the Detroit Red Wings July 7th in 1992. 92-93, playing for the Wings and seeing the name Howe on the back of a jersey, and it's a Wings jersey. It just works. 60 games played, 3 goals, 31 assists, 34 points. So the offense has really dropped off, but he's still playing a good mentorship role. 7 games in the playoffs, 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points. 93-94, he plays 44 games that year, 4 goals, 20 assists, 24 points. In the playoffs, 1 assist in 6 games. 94-95, 18 games played in what would be his final year in the NHL, again with the Wings. 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points. He has no points in 3 playoff games. So he misses out on Detroit's Stanley Cup as a player by a couple of years. In his WHA career, he played 426 games. He's 10th all-time in goals with 208, 10th all-time in assists with 296, 8th all-time in points with 504. In the playoffs, he adds 12 goals, 9 assists, 21 points in 20 games. As a National Hockey League player, he plays 929 games, 197 goals, 545 assists, 742 points. In the playoffs, 101 games played, 10 goals, 51 assists, 61 points. So as a pro hockey player, he plays 1,355 games. But again, WHA totals are not recognized by the National Hockey League, which I understand, but it's a shame. I know when I was a kid, I saw these hockey cards of players that were really good at WHA. Mark Tardif stands out. But they didn't play that long in the NHL, and so those WHA totals kind of forgotten. But yeah, so the Whalers keep him in the league, or keep him with their team. They end up trading him to Philly. He never did play for Boston, but he had a very, very good career. Shame he never won a Stanley Cup. He got to 2 Stanley Cup finals with Philly, just couldn't quite beat the Oilers on either occasion. But really solid career, and yeah, did a pretty good job himself as the son of Mr. Hockey. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.